Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join the SQFI team for our Learning Lunch webinar series today. My name is Sarah Milenich, and I'm the Marketing and Sales Senior Manager here at SQFI, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Today's comprehensive discussion on building a robust supplier approval program, Nicholson Kramer, and is going to be sponsored today by the 2016 SQF International Conference. However, before we get started with the presentation, I'd like to take a moment to go over our standard webinar protocol. First, I would like to let you know that this presentation will be recorded. It will take us about 2 business days to process this recording, but you should find it on our YouTube channel and our events page probably by the end of the business day on Friday. Second, if you have any questions for the speakers during the presentation today, please feel free to write them into the chat box that's located on the right-hand side of the screen. I will be copying these over to the presenters as they come in, and they will answer them at the end of the presentation during our Q&A period. First, I'd like to go over some of our SQF upcoming events. The rules and implementation of the Food Safety Modernization Act are on everyone's minds. Sorting through the FISMA final rules can be a time-consuming and confusing task. So we've put together our FISMA resource page to help you understand the legal and regulatory complexity of FISMA while alleviating some of the pain points our stakeholders are struggling with regarding implementation and execution. 2 important resources on this page are the comparison the Atchison Group did for SQFI of the preventative controls for human food and the produce safety rules to the elements of SQF Level 2 certification, specifically Modules 2 and 11. TAG's analysis indicates that being SQF Level 2 certified is a very robust, strong advantage to fulfilling your FISMA requirements. It's also important to remember that the SQF code is benchmarked to GFSI and global standards, and we don't just write our SQF code to the United States and the FDA rules and requirements. Our 2016 Information Day series is well on its way. We had one already in San Francisco, and we have 2 more coming up actually 3 more coming up in the United States. There's one that I have not posted on here yet, which is going to be December 6th. It's a Tuesday. It's the day before the Food Safety Consortium opens, so we will be having 3 more in the United States. One in Mexico City, which is August 18th, and then one in Canada, which is September 20th. And our Information Day is a day-long face-to-face informational seminar designed to introduce food suppliers at all levels of the food chain to the benefits of food safety and quality certification. Information Day attendees will leave with new insights, connections, and a clear understanding of how they can implement a food safety and quality program that best fits the needs of their business and the needs of their customers. I'm always seeking sponsors for our 2016 Information Day series, or if you're interested in sponsoring one of our Information Days, this also comes with a chance to speak at one of our Information Days. Please contact me and let me know. Our Learning Lunches. Our Learning Lunches were introduced in 2014, and the goals of the SQF Learning Lunches were to provide the SQF stakeholders and other interested parties information on topics that impact the implementation, maintenance, and support of the SQF system. They are another way to keep informed of industry hot-button issues, as well as strengthening your goals for continuous improvement. We are excited to announce that we are well into our Spanish and Australia-Asia-Pacific Learning Lunch tracks. Spanish tracks are presented in Spanish, and Australia-Asia-Pacific Learning Lunches are done at a time and in a language that's specific to that region. Here you can find the rest of our Learning Lunch series. Next month, Step Up to Quality on August 17th. That presentation will be done by Gary Smith of Eurofins. And then Leanne Chuboff, our Senior Technical Director, is going to be doing how to make your retailer happy. Actually, I think we might change that one. And our SQF Code Edition 8 update. An annual 4-hour SQF Professional update is required for re-registration of all SQF professionals. However, any SQF stakeholder may participate. Most frequently held as a webinar, the updates are held at least 4 times a year. Topics covered typically include updates to the SQF program, current results from the compliance and integrity programs, training program updates, enhancement to the SQF assessment database, a GFSI benchmarking status report for key modules, and the status of key SQF documents. The SQF Lead Auditor Auditing SQF Systems courses are offered by SQFI, continue to be one of our hot courses attended by prospective auditors, consultants, and suppliers seeking certification. We encourage all prospective SQF auditors to sign up as soon as possible for one of the listed course dates. We have 2 specialized auditor trainings, the packaging auditor training and our next slide, which is our ethical sourcing auditor training. We have these trainings already in Q1, and we are continuing with them for Q4. We're having these. Our next ethical sourcing auditor training is actually going to be at the SQF conference in October, and we are working on a date possibly in the beginning of October for the packaging auditor training class as well. So check back on our website for the information about that. Lastly, SQFI Out and About in 2016. We have a very robust trade show and meeting schedule planned out for the rest of the year. Please stop by and see us at one of the following conventions and events. We always welcome stakeholders and others to come by and say hello, ask a question, or give us feedback about how things are going for you and your program. Now to the sponsor. So today our sponsor is the 2016 SQF International Conference. The conference was designed and developed by your peers in the food safety industry and continues to be a valuable opportunity to gain knowledge and skills to strengthen your food safety and quality assurance programs. It's another great way to collaborate and connect with people who speak your language and enhance your professional career. The conference will increase your ability to protect your consumers, branding, and bottom line, and ensure that you and your company are fully prepared to implement our SQF code changes and program improvements coming in 2016. So I'm sure most of you got this email, but I'm going to go over some of the top 10 reasons why you should attend our conference this year. So edition 8 of the SQF code will be released in October. The exact date is TBD as of right now, but the conference is a perfect place to learn about code changes and to ask questions to the experts in person. We have a great education program this year, everything from the popular FISMA updates and how the SQF program will address your FISMA requirements to why listeria won't go away, how to navigate the political landscape within an organization, measuring business culture, best practices for an effective pathogen control program. A full list can be found on our conference website. SQFI has joined forces with the FMI Food Safety Team for 2016, and we've decided to combine the FMI Food Safety Forum with the SQF Conference, thus shaking out a dedicated retail education track, which is optional for the retailers to participate in, and suppliers can participate in that as well. But this is a great opportunity for suppliers and retailers to connect and to network and to share best practices. Getting in front of the suppliers, being in front of their buyers is It's huge this year for us. We have over 40 booths in our C3, which is the Customer Connection Center. This year, our sponsors are ranging from certification bodies to data informational records keeping companies to pest control management and cleaning supply organizations. Another great thing that SQFI is working on this year is we're in the process of creating our SQF Retail Wholesale program. The SQF Retail Wholesale certification will be a combined certification that will include both the corporate audit and the site audit. The program will be a combination of both existing SQF code format and modifying the elements in Module 2 to be more specific to the retailer, adding in GRPs, HACCP, and multi-site issues. Discuss and network with people who are in your shoes about food safety and quality issues and share best practices with each other. This is number 7. It's also a great way to meet your suppliers and put faces to the name of the people you work with at the certification bodies and us here at SQFI. Number 8. So we are over the moon about Captain Mark Kelly, who is our closing keynote speaker on Thursday. He's the husband of Gabby Gifford and captain of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. He will share stories about his work experience, his experiences going through the issue with Gabby Gifford, as well as being in a team and working under pressure. I will address our very important number 9 on the next slide, but number 10, last but not least, is the fun part of the conference. Who doesn't love margaritas and coconut rum drinks? I'm sure we'll need some fun in the sun in October. Put your fins to the left and get ready to eat a cheeseburger in paradise, because this event is one not to be missed. So here is a list of our 2016 pre-conference training classes. All of these classes are currently open for registration. Some are 1 day, some are 2 days, and there's one that's a 3-day course. But you can find registration and more information about this on our conference website under the training classes. Also, last but not least, here is some key contact information. There is a couple other things that you should not forget about our conference this year. It is our student research paper session that we're doing. We've actually extended that to July 31st. More information about that and what that is available on our website, and our FMI Foundation Scholarship. Great resource for students if you know any students who are looking to be involved and are involved in the food safety as a career field track right now. This is a great resource for them. And with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Gina. Gina is the Executive Director of Savor Food Safety International, assisting companies in developing long-term food safety cultural and behavioral change programs. She helps companies with new products and technologies from ideation to commercialization. As the owner-operator of her own organic bakery, Yum, manager of the health promotions at Columbus Public Health, senior manager, food safety and quality at the Kroger Company, to global director, retail food services at NSF International, Gina has spread her knowledge and innovative approach of food safety to organizations small and large. She's an active member with Stop Foodborne Illness, Conference for Food Protection, International Association for Food Protection, Food Safety Summit, Food Safety Consortium, and a contributor of Food Safety Magazine and Food Safety Tech. Gina attended Ashland University and has a BS in biology. Gina is also a registered sanitarian and environmental health specialist. We thank Gina so much for her time today and welcome her. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you, everybody, for joining. We have a great attendee list here. There's over 100 of you attending right now, and we had over 200 registrants from all over the world, actually. So I'm very excited about this topic. We're going to talk about building a robust local supplier approval program, and the key word is local. And so I want to talk about this whole concept of local, and when we talk about local, we first have to talk about food trends. And I think it's very important working in quality and food safety that we keep our finger on the pulse of what the food trends that the consumers are asking for and demanding. And right now what we're seeing is a high demand for healthy eating. They want fresh produce. They want low sugar, low sodium, no artificial flavorings or preservatives. They're really trying to get back to the basics, and we're seeing that even in the cry for clean labeling. And many of you may be dealing with that issue right now of changing your ingredient formulation so that you have cleaner labels, which is the topic or the category that falls under. And that's all because of that healthy eating trend. We also see where the food trends for global adventuring. We really see consumers focusing on different flavors of different regions of the globe. And in the United States, we see a very big emphasis on flavor focuses in Asia and different parts of Asia. And so that's been very exciting to see those flavors come out. We do see it in many manufactured foods as well. I'm working with a customer who makes fermented sauerkraut, and very, very unique, and one of his very popular flavors is a curry flavor sauerkraut. And so we're seeing those flavor focuses, especially in the United States, the consumers focusing on Asia. There's a gluten-free, and we call it gluten-free plus because there's more than just gluten-free that's going on in food trends. We're seeing this GMO-free product, sugar-free, sodium-free, halal, kosher, organic. And so we do have this gluten-free plus that's in the food trends right now. And again, many of you may be facing that in your facility that you're working with. And how do you source those products? How do you change ingredients? How do you make sure that your equipment does not become contaminated if you're running both gluten-free lines and gluten lines in the same building? So there's a food trends, and they affect us in the quality and food safety industry. The one we'll focus on today, which is a very big food trend all over the world, is local and micro-local. And so I've heard the terms being used as well that we have to, when we think about local and micro-local, what does that mean? And local, we're going to talk more about that, where local has a specific mindset and micro-local, which would be even closer to the region where people live. But there's also another term that I've heard, which is global, and that is really focusing in locally but knowing that we have a global economy and a global food system. So how do we, as we source our suppliers, how do we make sure that if we have those who are manufacturing certain ingredients for us that come to our facility, and then we incorporate that into the product that we're producing, how do we make sure, if we're committed to the local supplier food trend, that they're sourcing locally and that they're doing it at a safe and high quality standard? We'll talk more about that. Online ordering and delivery is a huge food trend right now, and it just continues to grow. People are utilizing not just their computers to order online, but they are utilizing their smartphones. And there are most people who actually use their smartphone as a computer, and they don't even have a computer. I can say that my 22-year-old son falls in that category. He has a laptop, but he hasn't used it for 2 years because his smartphone is his computer, and that's where he does all of his work and his research and web browsing, music downloads. So we're seeing that online ordering and delivery is growing, and people are wanting that. And so many of you in the manufacturing world, your brands might be offered online. And how does that work? How does that affect how you look at your product? Kosher, as I talked about, is also a food trend. And then we see the social responsibility. We are asked as quality and food safety professionals to get involved in a lot of these food trends that may be outside our normal area. And social responsibility is one of those items. Looking at fair trade, looking at animal welfare, child labor, the environment, making sure there's transparency of ingredients in the production, and that's listed on the labeling and the packaging. So all of those social responsibility categories fall in line with what we do as quality and food safety professionals every single day. And so it continues to be a trend with the consumer and a concern of the consumer. It continues to be a concern of many government agencies who are working in these areas diligently. So we see that social responsibility, a large portion of it being put on the weight of our shoulders as professionals. The last one with the food trends, and this specifically in the United States, and people are starting to jump on the bandwagon, is cannabis cuisine. We're seeing the legalization of marijuana in different states within the United States. There are other countries where marijuana is legalized, and cannabis cuisine has been around. But this is new for those of us who live in the United States. And how can that be done both in a safe, high quality, and the safety aspect of it does extend to food safety, but there are other safety elements. And so we do have to look at this food trend that is entering our system. As we look at those food trends, we want to focus on local today. And so let's find out, what does the consumer think about local? Again, this questionnaire comes from the United States, but it can be transferred over. And when the survey was taken, it just really focused on our consumers at different income levels really willing to pay more for local foods. And you can see a resounding yes. It doesn't matter what income level that they're in, they are willing to pay more, especially in 2014. I would love to see the survey conducted again in 2015 and 2016, because that local mindset is becoming more prevalent in the consumer. So when we look at that local mindset, we know the consumer is wanting to buy more, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, what does local mean to the consumer? Because as quality and food safety professionals working in the food industry, we have to understand what the consumer thinks about local. And so I captured this. I found it very, very interesting. This really is for you to use as a resource. You can find this information online, but this is what the consumer looks at and describes as local. Down at the bottom, you'll see, what does local mean? And I found this very interesting, because the general consumer, local means to them that their diet consists of foods that are between 1 hour's drive and 100 miles away, depending on the availability. Now, when we look at the average dinner, it travels about 1,500 miles from its source to the consumer's plate. And then when we think about food production in the supply chain and in manufacturing, there are many more miles where the different ingredients come from. And so we're asked, because of a social responsibility, to look at locally sourcing our ingredients that we use. And how do we do that responsibly? How do we do that efficiently? And how do we do that with a compliance in mind of keeping the food safe for our consumers? Well, we have to look at the availability of local. food, and I'm going to focus primarily on farms. This would be raw ingredients from the farm, and this information does come from the United States. I know that many other countries compile this type of information as well, and for those of you that are participating today that are from countries outside of the United States, I would encourage you to do some research and find out what is the availability of local food from local farms in your country. So in the United States, this is what we see. And I found this interesting because when we look at the number of local farms that are available, this survey and this information is telling us that the blue line that you see is a direct-to-consumer. So that's where the local food from local farms is sold directly to the consumer. And then the red bar tells us that the food is sold both to the local consumer and also elsewhere. So it would be in commerce. It might go to a broker, some type of a supplier, but that's what the red line. And then the green bar tells us that it goes into the supply chain, probably through a broker, but it's going to go into commerce. It's not going to be sold directly to the consumer from the farm. And the reason that I like these graphs and to be able to look at it, because if I, as a food safety and quality professional, am instructed that I need to now start looking at local sourcing of food from farms, I need to know, is it even going to be available and possible? And we can see that when we look at the farms that are available, a lot of local, that is considered local, the farm size, the very, very small farms, they're under $75,000 US, and most of their products are sold directly to the consumer. When we start moving up in the revenue that the farms generate, and so that would mean that the farm is much likely much larger, then we see where that product is going to be entering into commerce, into the supply chain. So this is good to know, and you can break your region down. Local food sales, if we look at overall local farm food sales, it accounts for $6.1 billion a year in the United States. So we do see more local farmers coming up, but they do tend to sit in that smaller revenue category, and so they may not be able to supply you with the amount of product that you need. When we look at the farm-to-fork supply chain, we've all seen this picture before. We have different commodities that come from the farm, from protein sources, seafood, fish, to produce. And one thing that we have to remind ourselves why local sourcing is so important is because a third of the food purchased in the world gets wasted or lost, and that's about 1.3 billion tons per year. And if we can shorten that distance, that especially produce is being transported into our facilities to be used as ingredients for the foods that we're manufacturing, we can reduce that waste or that loss. So we have a shorter travel time, especially for fresh produce. We look at the other things, and this information comes from Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is where this information comes from. Food loss and waste costs $680 billion US in industrialized countries, and it costs $310 billion US in developing countries. That's a lot of money that can be put back into those economies and help improve the economies, improve commerce, and also improve nutrition to the consumer. The reason that we see a large amount of food waste and loss, according to the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, is because there's a lack of coordination between actors in the supply chain as a contributing factor. And so I want to really keep this in mind, and I think all of this information is important to know. This falls under social responsibility. So again, as quality and food safety professionals, we become part of an actor in this particular social responsibility item to help reduce waste and loss of food in the supply chain. So let's look at basic supply chain management and how it works. And there are hurdles for local farmers to for us to go through the local approver process. So when we look at this, I've circled the areas that are primary hurdles. So it starts with procurement. Really, it usually starts with sales or marketing, or maybe a CEO that says, we are going to source locally. And they make that commitment, they verbalize it out loud to the consumer at large, and then the commitment's already made, and so then we're having to scramble backwards. How are we going to do this logistically? And when we look at supply chain management, the biggest hurdle in procurement is really purchasing and replenishment, making sure that they can purchase the products needed, and then can they have a consistent resource of it? Can it be replenished? Or do they have to find another local farmer to provide that product? So it might be multiple farmers, but making sure that purchasing can go through and replenishment is there, and how do you track that in procurement? But then we look at the quality and regulatory side. So there's the whole process that we take our suppliers through food review and evaluation of their products, their systems, looking at regulatory guidance and compliance. And typically, for those local farmers, many of them are at the size that are exempt from many regulatory guidance and compliance programs. But as a responsible food manufacturer, we want to make sure that we have good compliance standards set in place. And so our quality systems compliance may consist of looking at their sanitation programs, what is their hazard analysis system, recall system, how does that work? Can we build a proper recall system on a local supplier? What are the environmental monitoring techniques? Do they practice good agricultural practices? Regulatory compliance, letters of insurance, letters of guarantee. What if there's a returned goods policy? Those are just to name a few of those items that we're really concerned about working with local suppliers on. And so we have to have systems set in place because the safety of the food that we produce protects our brand and it protects the consumer. What are those food safety methods? So those are the hurdles that we see when we're working with dealing with local suppliers. So let's even drill down deeper. We talked about local suppliers and we talked about local farmers. Let's really look at produce. I want to talk specifically about local produce. And when we look at the supply chain of produce, I love this flow chart. So it shows us all the different areas. You have the farmer, and the farmer may do some self-consumption. They may sell to a broker or consolidator or an agent that way. They may take it directly to market, to the consumer. They might take it to a farmer's market. They may have a market stand set up right on their farm. And then it just goes in all different areas. And when you start looking at this, the first thing that comes to my mind when I saw this flow chart is I thought produce has a very short shelf life. And so if it has to go through all these processes and all these systems and all these places, it has to do it quickly. Can we build a robust local supplier program that can give quick approval so that fresh produce, when it's ripe, it's harvested, and needs to be distributed, can be done quickly? We're looking at 2 to 4 days. And so this really gives us this big picture of how the local produce goes from the farmer and then through the supply chain and eventually to the consumer. So how do we do this? And I think a great way, in my mind, when I look at a system, I always want to look at a case study. And there's the case study I'm going to present to you. There was a multi-unit grocery store that was, the CEO announced on TV, on the news, that all produce was going to be locally sourced within a 50-mile radius of every single store. Now, many of you attending this webinar, you're in manufacturing. So think about how many manufacturing units you have. Think if the CEO of your company announced on national TV, on the news, that you had to locally source your produce within a 50-mile radius of your facility. That would be incredible. And this was announced without anyone in the QA, food safety department, the procurement department, the produce department. None of them had a system built yet. It was announced because it was the right thing to do. So then they had to work backwards to make this happen. The CEO made this announcement because he knew it would drive consumer traffic to the stores if they were committed to sourcing local produce, and he knew it would give them a great competitive advantage. So how are they going to do this? Well, the old method that they had set up looked at, was very complex for local sourcing. So to go through procurement and to be an approved supplier was very, very complex. They had to go online, fill out lots of paperwork. There were multiple documents that they had to provide, and time for approval was about 9 months. Well, this announcement was made at the height of growing and harvesting season. They did not have 9 months to make this happen. They literally had weeks and days. And so they knew that fresh produce was driven by time and they needed to act quickly, but they also knew they needed to protect their consumer and have a system in place that was going to provide safe, healthy food. So they implemented new technology, and this new technology I think is really smart. They used mobile messaging. And so they partnered with a company who had put mobile messaging together as a way to collect information from local farmers. So they were able to capture very critical information. It's important to remember that capturing that critical information, a lot of it can be done even on a basic clamshell cell phone. It doesn't even have to be done on a smartphone, because you can still take pictures on a clamshell basic cell phone, which many farmers have. They carry them in the field with them. And they needed to make sure that this system, this way of capturing information through mobile messaging, through SMS, that needed to interface with their current quality management system platform. They also needed to be able to track and trace product, and they needed to improve their time for approval. And they were able to improve their time for approval process to 7 days. So they went from 9 months to 7 days. And I think that's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. But they knew they needed to protect the customer, but they also needed to honor the food trend and the social responsibility of sourcing produce locally within a 50-mile radius. So this is a screenshot of how the farmer sends information using text messaging. They, the company that provides this service sends out a text message to the local farmer that had been identified by the company because they worked with their Department of Agriculture to identify all the local farms so that they could find out what local farms were within a 50-mile radius of every single store, what type of produce was grown on those local farms that they could source within a 50-mile radius. And then they started communicating with them. So this is what the messaging looks like, and that information is received back. This shows procurement, so being able to say, you know, we need seedless grapes, and do you have them available? They need to be white or green seedless grapes. And how much do you have? What is the price? Take a photo and attach a photo of your product so we can see the quality. So all of this information is captured. Other information that can be captured through mobile is letter of insurance. They can take a picture of the letter of insurance and send it in. They can take a picture of the field. They can take pictures of their good agricultural practices, because it might be a 10-acre farm. It may not be a 1,000-acre farm plus. So being able to look at what are the good agricultural practices that they have. And so mobile technology really provides this a way of communicating this messaging. So technology is truly the key if you're going to source locally. I can't emphasize that enough. It cannot be done with pen and paper. It really needs to utilize technology. And Bill Gates really stated this back in January of this year, and he said, when information can flow easily, when data is democratized, the cost of doing business in agriculture goes way down. And when these partners can know each other easily and they can function as nodes in a single marketplace, agriculture will thrive. So I think that's very important. And so taking just some key items that Bill Gates stated back in January and boiling it down, when you're looking at building a robust local supplier program, you need to build local relationships. You really cannot just rely on your broker or a co-op that's going to pull it in. You need to build those local relationships because your company's brand is at stake, and you also need to communicate with them. I know that most regulatory requirements say to take one step back or go back one tier in your supply chain. But I will tell you, if you're going to put together a robust local supplier approval program, you need to build relationships with those local farmers. So build communication stream with local farmers. Remember, local farmers spend their time in the field planting and harvesting. They are not sitting at their desk working on a computer. And so utilizing a mobile communication system to gather information is key to building a successful, robust local approval supplier program. Remember that your questions that you're asking them, you need to use the KISS program. Keep it simple, sweetheart. We're talking about using SMS or texting, so we're looking at 140 characters or less. Very, very simple questions need to be asked and have those questions set in place. Maybe changing the wording so that it's simpler and easier to understand, using less syllables and smaller words. And also in building local relationships, you'll be able to build a better track and trace program on the produce coming into your facility that you're utilizing that's a local product. So this seems simple, but again, if you're going to source locally, you need to keep it simple because you'll be dealing with local farmers. And I love this picture from a local farmers market of different items that you see there. Many, many companies have started selling their goods, their local produce, their locally produced products at local farmers markets, and they've built a great reputation, and they've been able to grow from there into a larger company and a broader distribution. And so if you're going to build that local supplier program, I encourage you visit your local farmers markets and find out who those local farmers are in your region and around your facility. So again, it's extremely important to build that communication stream with the local farmers, and it's a great reminder that those local farmers spend their time in the field planting and harvesting. I just cannot emphasize that enough. So as we wrap up and we talk about building that robust supplier program, approval program, I think it's important to remember that the consumer has in their mind that those companies that are dedicated to buying fresh and buying local are socially responsible companies. It makes our job different as quality and food safety professionals. Some of us may say, well, it makes my job more difficult. And I would say it makes it different. We just have to look at working with local suppliers differently, and especially local farmers. The other item that I would just like to point out is that I have found that utilizing this text messaging, the mobile communication is extremely important. I did list the companies that does provide that I used the case study on. They've been very, very successful. They've also been able, through the case study that I utilized, this company was able to literally weed out suppliers, farmers that they did not want to work with because they did not have a robust, good agricultural practice program that met their standards. So the system has interfaced very well with their quality management system platform that they already had in place. And just think about having to track and trace over 100 units that are using totally different farmers and suppliers. And they've been able to do this successfully for over a year and a half now. So I think that is a great case study to be able to look at, and as manufacturers, as ingredient suppliers, to be able to say, okay, this is a good case study, we can learn from it. How can we look at our local supplier approval program differently and build one that's robust, sustainable, and is also socially responsible? So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the Learning Lunch with SQF.